The Second Amendment has had a ripple effect in gun laws across our nation for decades, and it is one of the most polarizing subjects in American society. The Second Amendment allows civilians to carry a firearm without military association. Its mere 27 words have spurred numerous court cases, intellectual debates, and is one of the most controversial topics in politics. Get ready to examine the Second Amendment's beginnings, its history, and impact on American culture, and where its legal interpretation is headed into the 22nd century. The Bill of Rights was adopted in 1791, and the Second Amendment was created to provide a constitutional check on congressional power under Article 1, Section 8, to organize, arm, and discipline the federal militia. The Second Amendment reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Referred to in modern times as an individual's right to carry and use arms for self-defense, the Second Amendment was envisioned by the framers of the Constitution as the true palladium of liberty. In addition to checking federal power, the Second Amendment enabled state governments to thwart and oppose the general government. Furthermore, it enshrined the ancient Florentine and Roman constitutional principle of civil and military virtue by making every citizen a soldier and every soldier a citizen. Dismayed by the lack of marksmanship shown by their troops during the Civil War, Union veterans Colonel William C. Church and General George Wingate formed the National Rifle Association in 1871. Its primary goal was to promote and encourage rifle shooting on a scientific basis. The NRA has been at the heart of defending civil rights since its inception and is arguably one of the oldest organizations in the United States protecting the civil rights of Americans. Every step forward that the country has taken towards pro-gun rights, the NRA has been at the forefront. It is possibly the most powerful lobbying organization in the country. Over the years, the NRA has been a political force to be reckoned with, and in situations where the Second Amendment seems threatened, the NRA takes political action to make sure those rights are quickly restored. The National Rifle Association not only upholds the Second Amendment for the citizens, but it also protects it, regardless of what political stance a person may have on firearms. Prior to the 1920s, there was little talk of gun control except at state level, and many of those laws were aimed at keeping weapons out of the hands of African Americans in southern states, rather than regulating firearms. In 1927, Congress reacted to the mob violence of Prohibition with the first federal gun restriction by enacting the expanded gun control law. This law banned the mail-order sale of handguns or any concealable firearm. In light of the growing interstate nature of criminal activity, the Senate directed its Committee of Commerce to investigate kidnapping, racketeering, and other forms of crime and to recommend the necessary remedial legislation. Debates raged over a 3-year period, resulting in the Federal Firearms Act becoming law with the approval of President Roosevelt on June 30, 1938. Its purpose was to regulate interstate commerce in firearms and thereby curb the possession of such weapons by criminals. The act required the licensing of all manufacturers and dealers involved in the interstate commerce of firearms. The act was soon tested.
In 1939, Jack Miller and Frank Layton were charged with violating the National Firearms Act by transporting a sawed-off, double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun in interstate commerce. Miller and Layton moved to dismiss the charge, alleging that the act usurped the state's police power and that it violated the Second Amendment. The trial court believed that the act did not violate the Second Amendment, so Minton and Miller appealed, and the appellate court ruled that the act did violate the Second Amendment. This delighted one group of people who believed that machine guns and other types of regulated firearms could be used for self-defense, and they should be able to own and bear any gun of their choosing. But others disagree with the ruling and believe that citizens should not be allowed to possess automatic and other such firearms without regulation. They believe the act would help to cut down on the surge of violence in this country brought about during Prohibition.
It was a big shooting in the 1930s. They thought it was an army of people, but it was actually a Thompson's machine gun with a drum magazine.
Now that laws could be enacted to regulate firearm possession, as the U.S. moved into the 1960s, turmoil gripped the nation and unleashed a wave of new demand for gun control. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963 prompted renewed debate concerning the regulation of firearms.
So Lee Harvey Oswald made up a name and said, I want this gun mailed by P.O. Box. And they never checked. Back then they didn't check. So his name that he used was A. Medell. Send this gun to my P.O. Box. He got the gun, practiced with it, and he killed the President of the United States.
Urban rioting starting in 1964 followed 4 years later by the assassinations of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Senator Robert Kennedy, fueled an inferno of outrage that demanded congressional action. That same year, Congress enacted the Gun Control Act of 1968, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. The act contained the most significant restrictions on firearms since 1934. The law regulated commerce in firearms, including importation and licensing provisions. Polls taken during that time showed that almost 80% of Americans favored these new restrictions. But how would these regulations be enforced? With prohibition a distant memory, an older federal agency referred to as the Alcohol Tax Unit was retasked into the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives in 1972. Its agents target criminal organizations illegally using and trafficking firearms, and investigated the illegal use and storage of explosives, acts of arson, acts of terrorism, and illegal use of alcohol and tobacco products. Besides hefty fines and prison time, those convicted of felony firearms crimes forfeit their Second Amendment rights and might never possess a gun again. The Firearms Owners Protection Act of 1986 amended the 1968 law to strictly define who can be a gun dealer, and many states have enacted their own laws, some with limits much stricter than those passed at the federal level. This has renewed the gun control debate, with many feeling the U.S. is going too far. As we move into the 21st century, the nation asked, would stricter gun control laws decrease crime? Should other types of guns be illegal as gun designs change? For instance, the so-called ghost gun that can be made at home?
They can get these guns totally off paper. They don't have to go to a gun dealer. They don't have to pass a background check. So that is causing a problem.
Many believe stricter gun control laws would not reduce crime, that by taking away a person's ability to carry a weapon for defense, the government makes it easy for criminals to harm people. Further, criminals will always find a way to get weapons. The debate should not simply be a question based on one liking or disliking guns or gun control. It should be about judging the effectiveness of proposed control, and particularly of government control as exercised through regulation. A gun in the right hands may be viewed as a tool for freedom, may be looked at as a heinous killing tool in the wrong hands. Maybe control should focus not on the gun, but in who wields it. As the ultimate protector of the Constitution, the debate rages as the Supreme Court has had relatively little to say in interpreting the wording of the Second Amendment, but expect this to change soon. The Second Amendment. Rarely have so few words sparked such heated rhetoric as have these. While a consensus may never be reached on gun possession, at least our Bill of Rights ensures that citizens always have the right to speak their mind and stand up for their beliefs.